In this video, we'll talk about the brain and the parts of the brain. So, for directional purposes, caudal is going to be the back part of the brain, and rostral will be the front part of the brain, near the forehead. And there's major parts of the brain that we're going to kind of cover through this process, but we're really going to hit it hard in lab. Meninges, ventricles, forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. We're going to break these down in the next couple of PowerPoints, in the next couple of slides. The forebrain is where the cerebellum is, and it really has an important area for our hormonal control or our homeostasis, which is going to be the thymus, the hypothalamus, and then our pineal gland or epithalamus. Our midbrain is going to be part of the brainstem, and then our hindbrain is back over here, and that's going to be where the cerebellum is. The medulla oblongata, that's going to be sort of the connection between the spine and the brain, and then the pons. We'll talk about them separately. The cerebellum contains 83% of the brain volume, and it has these things called gyres in it. Those are the folds that you see, and as we get older and older and older, these folds start to increase and increase and increase. When you're born, you kind of have a brain that's sort of smooth, and then as you get smarter and smarter, the only way we can keep these neurons intact and start to build on them is by folding them and crunching them. It's almost like a piece of paper. You could crunch them up and fold more in one area than if they were stacked, I guess. Soles are going to be the grooves between these folds, so those little lines that you're seeing. And then there's two hemispheres. These two hemispheres are connected by this middle area called the corpus callosum, and it's the area that connects the one part of the brain to the other. Functions of the cerebellum are going to be, or the different parts of the cerebral lobes, cerebral lobes. There's going to be the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe is going to be for hearing and smelling. The occipital lobe is going to be for vision. The parietal lobe is going to be for touch, pain, pressure, and taste. And the frontal lobe is going to be for voluntary motor functions, planning, mood, and social judgment. It's kind of interesting how they found this out, is because what they did is they found people with brain damage in certain areas, and then figure out what they were missing. So for instance, if there were parts of the brain that were missing and now the person couldn't hear, or if there was a part that was missing and now they couldn't smell, they knew it was what part of the temporal lobe. The forebrain, that's going to be right over here. That's going to be made up of a couple of things that we're really going to hit hard in 202, so I'm going to glance over them in 201. The thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. And they're going to enclose around the third ventricle. The thalamus itself relays station from the cerebellum to different parts of the brain. It sorts information. It groups similar sensory responses together and stores them that way. The hypothalamus is going to be hormonal secretion, and it works with the pituitary gland, which is called the master gland, and it's really vital for homeostasis. So thermoregulation, hunger, sleep, you name it, it's kind of controlled by homeostasis. Waste, release, everything. Epithalamus is going to be the pineal gland, and that's going to be an area that is not too far away from the occipital lobe, and it's because as light increases, it basically controls the production of melatonin. So as light increases, melatonin decreases. As light starts to decrease, it gets the impression that it's nighttime, so melatonin levels increase, and that gets you to fall asleep. The midbrain is right in the middle. It's sort of made up of a couple of different areas. The central penulcus, it holds up the cerebellum. The superior colliculi coordinates head and eye movement, and then the inferior colliculi it does reflexes and responds to sound. The hindbrain is going to be 10% of the brain mass. It contains 50% of the brain's neurons, and it functions to control motor functions, posture, balance, coordinates sensory input. The hindbrain, the pons, is part of the brainstem, and its function is to make nerves in and out of the cerebellum, helps control sleep balance, bladder control, posture, breath. So it basically looks for pressure in certain areas, and if the pressure gets too high, it realizes it has got to release it. Medulla oblongata are the parts of the brain, and they're called the pyramids. They are right back over here, and they are for connecting the right brain to the left brain, so that way everything's coordinated. The other key functions of the medulla oblongata are for coordination of homeostasis, cardiovascular center, it regulates heart rate and blood pressure. Respiratory center controls rate of depth of breathing, and reflex center with things like vomiting when there's something full of acid or something full of bacteria that you have to get rid of, hiccuping, swallowing, coughing, sneezing, yawning. Our next video will be the spinal cord.